Welcome, Truth Seekers. Today on Digitiser we're asking a question. Are we the baddies? And if so, did something change? What happened? Why did it happen? And where even did they?
What?
The answer may be found here in Sussex on the south coast of England, or as we Brits like to call it, so glad. So glad to have met you. Sussex is these days divided into east and west, and often dismissed as a sort of rural overspill of London. However, Sussex has traditionally had a strong sense of its own identity and is proud of its inhabitants' stubbornness. In fact, until relatively recently, Sussex was isolated from much of the rest of the country. To the north, you had a dense forest called the Weald that was only really accessible through sticky clay roads. To the east and west, you had marshes, and to the south, you had the sea. It was this body of water, the English Channel, that has brought Sussex its greatest challenges. The C word that nobody wants to hear, amphibious assault.
That's 2 words.
We've come to Pevensy. It's a very noisy gate, which, apologies, we haven't brought our WD-40 with us. Well, it's really our place to rock up to English heritage sites with a can of WD-40 and start oiling their hinges. Not really our role. There's people coming. Corgis, they're a stupid dog, aren't they? Walking their corgis. Pevensy Castle has been pivotal in some of the most important events in British history. Originally there was a Roman fort built on this site, then in the 6th century the Anglo-Saxons inhabited it, then the Normans rocked up, built a castle. During the Napoleonic Wars there were a couple of massive cannons positioned on top, and during World War II British and Canadian troops were garrisoned here. What do you call an actor who's had soldiers inside him? No. The punchline is Garrison Ford, but actually I've lost confidence in that joke now. By the early 5th century, the Roman Empire was in decline, and the Romans who were here in Britannia had grown a bit fed up of having to defend their borders against the barbaric Picts and Scots. So they invited over a bunch of Germanic mercenaries, the Angles, the Saxons and the Jutes, to guard their borders. When the Romans eventually left Britain in 410 AD, it left behind a power vacuum. The whole economy collapsed, towns fell into disrepair, plagues spread, and conflict broke out between local landowners and warlords. This is all turning into a history documentary.
There is a pigeon over there.
Where?
In the wall.
What do you mean in the wall?
I've got it on camera.
Okay, maybe it's a brick.
No, it's definitely a pigeon. It was flapping its wings. But I saw one just like actually go into the wall.
What do you mean go into what? Fly into it and break its face?
It's somewhere in there.
Okay, we'll have to
It's camouflaged.
Have to take your word for it.
Yeah.
I mean, great going, David Attenborough.
Oh my goodness. Duckies, look at the baby ones. Look at the baby ones. So cute. Oh my goodness. Oh.
Right. Listen. I've spent freaking
I can't see you because it's so zoomed in.
Who cares? I've spent a week researching this and I'm losing momentum because you're too busy filming birds. I don't care about
They're
wall
baby
pigeons
ones.
or baby pigeons. What are they?
They're baby black.
You don't even know.
water
Baby
birds.
black water birds. That's not a species. Look. I'm losing momentum because all you're doing is we've only got like a little bit of stop the bird filming nonsense. I see. I've lost my place in my notes.
You're
No,
really
don't.
zoomed in.
Well, great.
You're shaking the camera.
I'm more interesting than birds and all nature, frankly. I've lost my No, you're doing it again. Stop. Now I'm falling over the rickety... What is this? I want to go in the castle, but the corgi people are on the drawbridge. That's a proper dog.
All dogs are proper dogs.
That's not like a corgi, that's an actual dog.
That's an actual dog, yeah. Very
it's
nice
like
dog.
I don't know
very
what
nice
type
dog.
it is, but it's like, you know,
That's
like
a
a proper
collie. Border collie.
dog. Now there's
He's a-
whistles blowing. This place has turned into a madhouse. Get off
This
the
is-
bridge, get off the bridge.
Okay, let's go.
So once the Romans cleared out, the Angles and the Saxons sensed an opportunity and started arriving in Britain in huge numbers, bringing their families with them, their customs, their culture. The historian Peter Hunter Blair described it as a form of mass immigration. It's all right. The woman's closing the castle now. She told us to clear off. Get out, you're not welcome here. In the 6th century, the monk Gildas, who was a sort of 6th century Nigel Farage, he described the Saxons as the scourge of God. You know, and it was all the...
How did
Some
she
kids
know?
just shouted out, "Hello, mate."
G'day, mate, I believe.
Good day, mate. I mean, you're Australian.
How
you're
did
not
they
saying
know?
that. I mean, we're being cussed. They're only about 10.
I don't think it's called being cussed out to say...
Okay, she shouted, "Good day, mate."
That's
at
not
us,
cussing
and then
someone
ran
out.
away. Let's go and film the next bit somewhere else. Mint. Yeah, it's mint. Is it mint? Is that mint? I don't want to touch it in case it's... it's stingers. Don't come near me. Don't come near me. Is it mint or stingers?
I mean, you can try touching it.
No, I'm not going to
Sniff
touch
it.
it.
You can smell it if it's mint.
Just come near me. Get off. Don't come near me.
Mint?
Well, I don't know. I don't want to
I
wait.
can smell mint. I think I can actually smell it somewhere.
Nah, don't know what that is. I'm a bit thrown off by those kids shouting, "Good day, mate." What did they say?
G'day, mate.
And they keep looking over at us. Probably because they want to see if I'm going to go over there and kick them. So, can't get into the castle. Well, we could have if we got here a bit early and hadn't been stuck in traffic. Also, it's £10.50 per person. And I saw her in there. There's not a lot in there. To be honest, you're not missing much. It's fine out here. It's hot. So, where was I? I don't even know where I was because of those stupid girls. Interestingly, when they first arrived here, the Saxons, and decided we'll have this fort in 417 AD, they killed everyone inside. That's something to think about, isn't it, Sonia?
That's a bit cruel, isn't it?
Cool.
Cruel.
Did you say it was cool?
I said
Mass
it was
slaughter.
No, cruel.
Do you know what this video is going to be about?
Yeah, I
And
said.
you're saying the
No.
killing of innocent people is cool?
I said cruel.
She said-
And if you were
It
listening,
still sounds like you're saying cool.
If you were listening,
Still
you would
sounds
have
like you're
heard
saying
the
cool.
R.
The shirt's too long. It looks like a smock on me.
That's the fashion.
Is it? From what?
Ancient times.
Okay. It's taken us a long time to film this bit because Sonia thinks the lighting's unflat. I've tried to get her on camera, but she finds the lighting unflattering.
Well, it is
sorry,
on the
Sonia
other
fans,
camera.
those of you who want to see some
It's
more... F***ing hell. I touched it. It is a stinger.
Why are
It
you
is a
sniffing
stinger.
it after you realise it's a
What do you
stinger?
mean sniffing it?
I thought you
wasn't
went back to
sniffing
have a
it.
sniff.
No, I fell over.
Oh, sorry. Whoops.
Like there's a ditch here. It was a stinger. Ah! Ah!
Let's see.
At least we know it's not mint now. Just as well I didn't lick the leaf. So of course, the Britons that were here after the Romans left weren't too happy about all these newcomers rocking up on their shores. And although there wasn't a specific war, there were skirmishes that broke out. One of them, the Battle of Hastings, was a big victory for the Britons, at which King Arthur is supposedly led the charge against the Saxons. Ultimately, the Britons lacked unity, and before long, the Saxons established their first kingdom here in South Saxons, or Sussex. And over the next 400 or so years, they shaped the cultural identity of Britain. Fast forward to the 28th of September 1066, William the Conqueror landed a fleet of 700 ships at Pevensy.
Glad you said ships.
As opposed to what?
Well, replace the P with a T.
Well, why would I have said that?
Imagine he landed that many.
Why would I have said that, Sonia? I'm talking about William the Conqueror hitting his invasion fleet. Why would I have said he landed a fleet of 700 ships? As I was saying, on the 28th of September 1066, William the Conqueror, also known as William the Bastard, rocked up in Pevensey with a fleet of 700 ships. Back then, Pevensey was a peninsula jutting out from the Sussex coast. William climbed out of his boat and immediately face planted on the beach, which a ripple of fear spread through his men. But one of his chieftains said, "Oh, look, William's already got England in his hands," which was a good save because, frankly, he was comporting himself like a sort of Norman Mr. Bean. So they marched on up here to what had been the Roman fort, which at the time was occupied by Saxons, and they basically cut a ditch in the peninsula separating it from the mainland, so it became an island.
Oh, that must have taken forever.
They just got a big saw out. Sort of sawed it off. And the rest, as they say, is history. Incidentally, if you're wondering about the question that I set up at the beginning is, are we the baddies? There's some really good stuff coming up later on that's all about the modern day. If you don't like history, just skip to that. But this is all really useful context. Please don't be bored. Like, comment and subscribe. The Normans then later marched to Hastings, which is where we're going next. Anglo-Saxon King Harold Godwinson wasn't just facing a threat from the Normans falling over, but also from the Vikings, who had landed a force near York in the north of England. Harold sent his army up to meet them in the Battle of Stamford Bridge and won a battle which some consider to be the end of the Viking era. However, the delay allowed the Normans time to get a foothold in southern England. So after defeating the Vikings, Harold sent his forces south. On October the 14th, he met the Normans in battle. Literally here. Here, this was the battlefield. Half of it is now accessible, and we're going to go and see that in a minute. The rest of it has this town on it called Battle. Do you think that's why they chose here, Sonia, because it was called Battle?
Well, it makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah. So the Battle of Hastings, October the 14th, 1066, the most famous battle in history, where the Anglo-Saxons finally fell and King Harold is reported to have got an arrow in his eye.
It's a rumour.
Like, hey, bad choice of words. We've got an arrow in his eye.
Hey, do you want to hear some gossip? Do you want a bit of tea?
Okay, but no, there's a point to it, is that it's now disputed that even though it's depicted in the Bayeux tapestry of him going like that they actually think now he just might have died in another way.
Oh.
Something like 7,000 men died. The battle started about 9 a.m.
It's early.
and lasted all day, and it was very grueling. William the Conqueror, aka William the Bastard, marched on to London, and he was crowned the first Norman king of England. Anyway, so the Normans basically over the next 400 years set about reimagining Britain. How cool is that? In battle they have a bus number 1066. That's so good. We're here in battle because we're going to go to a medieval knights tournament to learn some more about the history of warfare. What? What is it good for? Some people, even though there was like contemporary reports that the battlefield was like just littered with corpses. In fact, you know, in case you're enjoying a sandwich in the cafe, it has like a vivid description of the battle on the wall of the cafe here at Battle Abbey, explaining how there were like rivers of blood just rolling down the hills into the valley. But actually some people think the battle didn't even happen here, because they've done digs and they've never found any bodies.
Fair lady, give the phone to the man.
Off you go.
Oh my god.
What is your name?
Sanya.
Sanya. A round of applause for Sanya! There you go, Sanya. Superb. And now, my friends, strike up the band, the greatest heralds ever to visit battle. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for your herald. Musicians, blow thy horns.
This was the Abbey's warming room or common room where the monks would work in cold weather. I know that because I read it on a plaque. Plaques are useful if you want to know stuff. Just a little tip for you. If you go somewhere and there's a plaque, try reading it. It's like gives you some sort of context. Plaque. Plaque. I really want to scream. There's people over there, but I'm trying so hard not to just yell. They've gone, bah!
Paul,
bah!
stop.
Bah!
Paul.
Bah!
Paul, stop. You're out of control.
Bah!
Stop.
I mean, it's impressive, isn't it? I mean, it's a shame when you see this, because it's so impressive. It's a shame that you, Sanya, hate monks so much.
What do I hate?
Monks. You've got a thing about monks, haven't you?
No.
You hate monks. You're always like, anytime monks come up into the conversations, you're like, I wish they were eradicated and like all killed. You say this all the time about monks. Don't you? She does. She's got a problem with monks. She's got an issue. Got a big issue with monks.
I don't know what you're talking about.
She comes here and she's like, I hate it because this is where monks once were.
Paul, you're like the pigeon at the castle that went into the wall.
Yeah, we're not talking about that. Oh, so yeah, if I was in here in a bird costume, I'd love it. You don't know what I'm saying.
Can't really hear what you're saying.
I know. Do you reckon any novice monks got in whatever this is?
What do you think it is? It's like a wardrobe or something.
It's like a nook. They don't need wardrobes. They only got
It's like
one
a reading
item.
nook.
They got one item of clothing. It's not really wide for reading. Toilet? Ugh. Don't want to be anymore. I don't want to be where monks' poo's been. Don't. Let me go. You're telling me to stay for your arty shots. Can I get out now? The people are going to leave and I'm going to want to scream again. There. Graceful. See all these bricks here are green.
Yeah.
Do you know why that is?
They got mouldy.
Oh. Oh, because I was going to say, no, I was touching them now and now I'm disgusted. I was going to say because I painted them, but now I've touched them and now you've made me think I've probably got disease.
Maybe they're just like made out of the Hulk or something.
Yeah, probably that, saying you like Hulk meat.
This place is so cool, and do you know what I appreciate about it so much more is like we don't have stuff like that's man-made, human-made, as old as this in Australia. So it's like
You've got Paul Hogan's house, haven't you? That's like
built by
that's
the ancient
equivalent-
monks.
Yeah, that's the equivalent of Battle Abbey. Is like Paul Hogan's house. You have a lot of Australian heritage, and there's only one thing on it, and that's Paul Hogan's house. The last Norman king of England was King Stephen, who was succeeded by Henry II, I think. And Stephen had taken the throne following a period in history called the Anarchy, where Stephen, I think, and his cousin Matilda basically fought over the throne. I literally read this like 30 seconds ago because you said you wanted to film me coming down there, and do I have anything to say? And I didn't, so I looked that up. So if any of that's wrong, there never was a King Stephen and King Matilda, and I've been punked.
King Matilda.
Queen Matilda.
You can have a King Matilda. There's
Do
no
what you
rule.
like. Try and I want because it's echoey.
Yes, I know it's echoey, and
I want to just scream. I'm trying not to do it.
All right, let's go.
Everyone's just looked at me. The man behind me,
yeah,
he's got a hamburger.
hamburger.
Why do you well, the only thing
It's not very medieval, is
No,
it?
I don't care about that. The only thing I've seen for sale is hot dogs, so I had a hot dog. I'd much rather have had a hamburger.
I'm sure we can find them. He's got one
He's got two. He's got one next to him as well.
for later.
I wanted a hamburger.
Well, I'm sure you can get one. Don't you think? Maybe.
She got a hamburger?
Go and ask.
Yeah, I can't have a hot dog and then a hamburger. I am meant to be on a diet, so that there's less chance of me dying suddenly. But I'm just disappointed, Sandy. Why didn't you find
What?
me hamburgers?
I can get you an ice cream if you want.
What you mean is you want an ice cream? Yeah, I'll have an ice cream.
Paul got a medieval flavoured ice cream, didn't you?
It's not, well, no, Georgian.
Georgian?
Yeah, as in 1700s.
Oh, Paul got a
18th
Georgian
century.
flavoured ice cream.
British Heritage brought this back.
Brown bread flavoured ice cream.
Bled.
Blam bled. Cancel, delete that.
Sorry?
Just don't worry.
Weird.
Yeah. Okay, so let's see how nice it is.
So it's, apparently the Georgians
Right,
were...
folks, in about 5 minutes' time, we're going to have our next instalment of the Knights tournament. This is
Exciting.
the first round of the Knights tournament proper, where our Knights will fight for points. We had the archery competition this morning to warm ourselves up, but this is where the teams start earning points. So 5 minutes for the sword fighting section of the Knights tournament. We'll see you soon.
Right, so it's... they apparently, the Georgians were big on what they called icy cream.
Oh,
They had weird flavours like parmesan and artichoke.
wow.
So last summer,
Didn't Heston Blumenthal try and bring that back? He had like
Probably.
mustard flavoured ice cream and
just
stuff
sounds
like that.
He just does
We
stuff
bought
like-
some.
Yeah.
It wasn't that nice.
No.
So is that nice?
Yeah.
These peasants haven't come to see us talk. They've come to see us fight.
He's going to go in there hard,
We are in the undercroft.
Yeah, because basically it wasn't just an abbey. Afterwards it became like a country estate until like 1976. And it became a tourist attraction eventually. But during the Second World War it was used for training for D-Day. You know, again, the troops were stationed here. But it's strange because one of those battles happened because Normans, French. The French came over and picked a fight with the Anglo-Saxon British, who originally came from basically Germany. Whereas D-Day, we were going to go and liberate France from the Germans. Isn't it funny? Are you brave enough to put your hand in there?
No.
Why? I have.
What the?
Go on, do it. Put your hand in there. No, don't cheat by looking what's in there. Put your hand in there. Put your hand in there.
No, I don't want to.
Put your hand in there.
I don't want to.
Why? Come on, do it. I'll film you.
It's wet.
Put your hand in. You don't have to touch the sides. Trust me, that's something I've learned over the years.
Okay, done it. Paul!
There's no mention here at Battle Abbey of the fact that the Battle of Hastings might not have actually happened here. It's like when I went to Loch Ness years ago, and like their entire tourist, it's a very beautiful loch, but their entire tourist trade is kind of 50% based upon the Loch Ness monster. And they've got a
What's the other 50% based on?
that is like nice and Scottish. And I went to the Loch Ness Monster Visitors Centre, which has got a huge like sculpture of Nessie outside. And you go round it and it's like, yeah, Loch Ness Monster, here's a photo, and then at the end it's like there's like a plaque that says like Loch Ness Monster don't exist, mate. Whereas here, unless there's a plaque at the end where it goes,
as we leave.
just so you know that was a waste of your time.
Just so you know your visit was all based on a lie. But hey, there's a giant arrow in the ground on the battlefield.
That must be where he got his eye poked out, or not. There's a load of kids playing on it. Disrespectful, isn't it? It's like building a seesaw in Dealey Plaza in Dallas.
What's the matter?
That's the latrine. That's where the monks shit and pissed.
Oh. The large arches gave easy access for cleaning.
Ah, so it was in here. This was where all their poo was, so they'd just do it over the top.
Paul, that's horrible. Oh, that's a living history camp, but there's no one there.
So if we go in there, we'll probably have to talk to them. So it's like a living history, like medieval camp. It's like a medieval camp with like people
really
dressed
cool.
up. It's really cool, but we're too scared to go in because there's no one else in it, other than the people acting like medieval
We'd have
folk.
to talk to people by ourselves.
Yeah, we'd have to go, oh, what's that you're doing there? And they'd go, oh, I'm weaving. Oh yeah, we use a type of medieval weaving called
Woving.
Flantington's not. Or the worst thing is they'll be doing a thing, and because they're shy as well, and they want you to kind of say to them, what are you doing? And they don't, and they're doing their thing. And, they just
then
look
we
up.
don't
No,
say
and then
anything, and they don't say anything.
We stand there like this, and they're doing this, and they just go,
No, walking away.
no, isn't that a squire? That's one of the squires. He's not wearing armour.
He's
So I
carrying.
go, shall I run up there and just kick him really hard up the arse?
No!
Really, just like run up.
We can spy. I
But
think
this is
they
the-
can see us. They can see
I
us
know.
through the gap in
and
the
what's
toilet
really
and the trees.
undignified
They
is,
can-
we're
they
stood
can see us.
behind a portaloo. It's so undignified because we're too scared to go into the living history camp.
I'll
Because
film it from the gap between the portaloo and the
yeah,
tree.
go on, Sanya.
Yeah, that's the. You can't really see it. That's the camp. You can't really see it.
Wait
Anyway,
till-
that's what it looks like. You've all seen it now.
So there are other attempts to invade Britain by sea. In 1377, the town of Rye, just to my right here, was raided by the French, burned during the 100 Years' War. In 1588, there was a fear that the Spanish were going to invade, but they were thankfully defeated by the British Navy. In 1688, William of Orange landed a force of 14,000 men in Devon, and they marched into London to overthrow his uncle James II in an almost bloodless coup. I'm a little bit distracted because I think I've just found rhubarb. Is that rhubarb? That's rhubarb.
Oh, we found rhubarb.
Why is there rhubarb here? Leave a comment if you think that's rhubarb. Anyway, during the Napoleonic Wars in the 19th century, there was another fear that the French were going to invade. So all along the Sussex coast, it was fortified with these Martello towers. This is Martello Tower number 28. These were...
Number 28 out of how many?
Unknown. No one knows. They were generally about 12 metres tall by, I think it was some ridiculous number thick, like sort of 3 metres thick walls. And they would have a gun on top.
Look how high up the door is. How on earth would you get into that?
Well, they had ladders. That was genuinely...
You could only get in by a ladder.
Well, you didn't want people just rocking up. You didn't want the French knocking at your door. So they'd have a ladder and then pull it up inside after them.
Wow.
Yeah.
And
Really cool.
is this like a moat?
I'm guessing so, some sort of moat. I mean, it looks like they're not all like this. Some of them are just sort of on top of a hill. This one's got like a wall around it. I mean, I wouldn't get too close because this fence is rickety.
Does not look safe.
So in a minute, Sonia will film over there and you will see how flat this part of the coast is, which is part of the reason why it made like the perfect place to land your forces. You had a bit of a walk from the sea, but it did make life quite a bit easier. But also it was quite easy to defend from the point of view. These Martello towers could have a clear line of sight right out to sea, and a clear shot as well with the cannons. Boom, boom, boom.
It's not very tall.
It is. It's 12 metres
but
tall.
But like, look at the top of the tower.
I'm really sorry. I just realised I put my hand down my trousers and scratched my balls while you were talking to me.
I didn't. Oh, I was only focusing on your face.
Thank God for that.
Look where the top of the tower is in relation to the sea. It's not very tall. I mean,
the sea isn't that way. You pointing the camera over there. That's the sea. That's land.
That was sea.
That's land. That's like hills.
Are you sure?
My God,
no,
Tanya, that is the sea. I can literally see the sea. Look at the sea.
It goes around.
No, it doesn't go around there where there's clearly bloody hills. It's the South Downs there.
What?
That
looks like it's the sea.
That is sea. The blue thing is sea. Those are hills.
Oh yeah, I thought it was all the sea.
What do you mean? It's not everything
I thought the sea stretched around.
No. Sea stops when land starts and mountains and hills begin.
Top of the tower. The sea.
And hills and South Downs. There. Not sea. Not sea.
Okay.
Not...
It's too zoomed in.
Not sea.
There's so many pretty flowers everywhere.
Yeah, aren't they lovely? Look.
No! Oh, that's a terrible thing to do. I nearly fell. There are so many gorgeous wildflowers here that I'm stunned
Sure, they're not
and amazed
seaweed,
at the
Sonia,
exquisite
because we're practically
beauty.
underwater here. You sure it's not seaweed? From the Romans to the Spanish to the French, Sussex has always been on the front line of Britain's defences. And so it was in 1939 when the supervillain Adolf Hitler pumped his Nazis into Poland and prepared to invade Britain.
Oh!
Planning for the invasion, known as Operation Sea Lion, began in earnest in June 1940. Hitler planned to ferry thousands of troops across the English Channel, landing them all up and down the southern coast. Partly because of its relatively flat coastline, Sussex was an important part of Hitler's bridgehead. Eastbourne, Brighton, and here Hastings were all designated as landing sites. Hitler's plan was to land the first wave of troops in Dorset. The second front would open here in Sussex, with the 16th German Army landing in Rye. German paratroops would drop onto the South Downs behind Brighton, and another wave would secure the newly fortified Royal Military Canal. Sussex would have been hit with the full force of the German invasion, with the wide shingle beach here at Hastings providing a potential landing strip for German aircraft. British forces built defences all along the coastline. Tank traps, gun emplacements. The beaches at Hastings, Brighton, Eastbourne were mined and covered in barbed wire, and everything 20 miles inland was a no-go area, with only residents allowed in and out. The Luftwaffe battered the Sussex coast, trying to destroy the fortifications. But thanks to Britain's air superiority, the Battle of Britain only ever took place in the skies, and the Germans were forced to abandon their invasion plans. Sussex instead became a staging post for retaking Europe, with thousands of American, Canadian and British troops stationed here, taking part in exercises to prepare them for D-Day. Tanya! Tanya!
Yeah.
Tanya!
Oh.
I can't get it out. I can't get my foot out.
Oh no.
Oh my God.
Oh no, Paul. Oh my God. Are you okay?
Not funny.
I wasn't laughing.
It's not funny. It's a serious bit. That you laughed at me falling over. It's a serious bit. War. The next bit's even more serious.
Uh-oh.
Don't like serious bits. The next bit's really serious. I won't be putting my foot in a shark's mouth doing that bit. Hopefully. Few of us would argue against World War II being a war that needed to be fought. It was a reaction to the aggression and expansionism of Nazi Germany, fascist Italy and imperialist Japan. I mean, yes, there were political and territorial gains to be made, and there were some certainly questionable decisions from Dresden to Hiroshima. But the Holocaust needed to be stopped. World War II was a just war, but was it the last just war? Was that the last time that we were the good guys? I mean, there's a case to be said that the Kosovo War was a just war in 1999. I mean, you could even argue that the first Gulf War was a just war, even though there's also the case to be put that that was about Western access to oil. So if we're not the good guys, if there are no more just wars, what happened? Since the end of the Gulf War, which was 1991, right, the USA, often with, you know, its mostly ignored lapdog Britain in tow, has been involved in something like 251 military interventions. That's including major wars and smaller skirmishes, you know, where they've been directly involved. Biggest of those obviously was the war in Afghanistan, which lasted 20 years from 2001 to 2021, and the Iraq War, which was 2003 to 2011. You know, both of those was started with like questionable motives or questionable justifications. Yeah, there were legal and ethical issues. You know, I mean, if everyone remembers, you know, the whole weapons of mass destruction, you know, farce. As a justification for Iraq, you know, and they've had, as has been proven, sort of long-term consequences for sort of stability in the Middle East, yeah, and as a consequence globally. Russia isn't much better. I mean, from the first Chechen wars to like Syria and Ukraine, you know, their military interventions though tend to be more sort of localised rather than on a sort of big overseas scale. Compare this to China, right, which, you know, supposedly our big geopolitical rival, that, you know, we're always told, oh, bad human rights, oh, Tiananmen Square, oh, they only let you have one child, oh, they're editing our Marvel movies. And you compare it to sort of Britain and America, you know, 251 military interventions. Do you know, Sanya, how many military interventions China has had since 1991?
2?
0.
Oh.
Barring a couple of kind of border skirmishes with India. Nothing. They stay out of it.
What about Tibet?
But there's been nothing. They might rattle their sabres. They might, they might kind of, put some ships in the near it, in the sea near it, but they're not invading. We're always told it's going to happen. They're going to invade, but 0. They just stay out of it. And yet we stick our feet into all these situations uninvited. And the thing that I've been looking into is why. I mean, wars, by their very nature, are a grey area. Yeah, but we're always told every war that we're involved in is just. It's a good war. It's how we get a better, safer, more secure and stable world. Just one more war and everything will be okay. War, what is it good for? Well, it's good for business. In his farewell address to the nation in 1961, President Eisenhower warned the American public at the height of the Cold War to guard against the unwarranted influence and misplaced power of something he called the military-industrial complex.
Until the latest of our world conflicts, the United States had no armaments industry. We have been compelled to create a permanent armaments industry of vast proportions. We must not fail to comprehend its grave implications. We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist.
People get rich and make money off of wars.
Yeah.
I don't know who exactly.
Well, the arms.
People or companies. It's a business. I just always.
Ah!
Oh.
It's not funny, Sanya.
I wasn't laughing.
Why? If you told me to sit there. So the arms industry existed long before World War II. It first kind of came into existence during the 16th century, and then with the British Empire becoming established, there was a need for weapons and equipment to be sent to the colonies. The Industrial Revolution obviously sort of changed things dramatically with, increased sort of automation of machinery and the ability to sort of mass manufacture weapons. But the real turning point came with World War I. It wasn't just a time for, huge arms sales. It was a time for innovation, the development of tanks, chemical weapons, and British arms manufacturers secured kind of massive contracts. Because here's the thing, it's what wars are, as much as anything else, is they're a proof of concept. They used the memory of World War II and then the threat of communism to basically push for massively increased military spending.
From coast to coast, hardcore Rebs continue to use every available technique, ruse and artifice to capture the minds and control the behavior of loyal Americans.
The evidence we have gathered all points to a collection of loosely affiliated terrorist organizations known as Al-Qaeda.
Tonight, British servicemen and women are engaged from air, land and sea. Their mission? to remove Saddam Hussein from power and disarm Iraq of its weapons of mass destruction.
What happened is we found ourselves in a situation of a world in which war was just the norm, was a perpetual background noise. Korea, Vietnam, so many others, alongside this kind of glorification or almost deification of the military. So it kind of blinded the public with patriotism. If they didn't support their government or didn't support the actions being taken, they were somehow unpatriotic. And this was often all the while their own civil liberties and rights were being eroded. I mean, just look at the McCarthy era. And there always had to be some new scare. Following the end of the Cold War, we had terrorism, the war on terror. Now we've got a kind of resurgent Russia again. And it's always interesting how one seems to replace the other. We don't hear about the war on terror now, is it going on? Oh, perhaps they've all been defeated. But, let's cast our minds back to kind of 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago. That was all we heard about. ISIS, Al-Qaeda, terror, 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 terror. And then now we find ourselves, it's Russia, 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 Russia. This all sort of matters to me because, I come from quite a sort of big military family in the sense that my dad, he did his national service and then rejoined the TA. My sister was in the RAF. I've had 2 nephews who fought in Afghanistan. And Afghanistan was the big one for me because it was like, what are we achieving there? We're just fighting. It felt pointless, so pointless. And I don't think I'm alone in that. I don't think I'm saying anything that a lot of people have thought.
Are these soldiers properly looked after?
Well, yeah.
Do they get paid enough? Do they get aftercare? After everything that they've been through and they've seen, and so many come back with PTSD and other issues that they're dealing with, and then just left to it, and no one really helps them through it. There's just not enough in place to support them when they're literally risking their lives.
But then, so I just wanted to understand why. Why do we have these wars? Who's benefiting? Who's benefiting? Because I think I speak for a lot of people when I say it makes me feel less safe, these wars. It doesn't make me feel more safe, it makes me feel less safe. So who is benefiting? And I know this is such a tonal shift from the first half of the video. I know it's a tonal shift, but this is what we do on this channel. Get used to it. That's what we do. But anyway, it gets even more bleak. Immediately following World War II, the British arms industry was nationalised. But in the 1980s, the early 1980s under Margaret Thatcher, there was more of a move towards privatisation. And so British arms manufacturers such as BAE, which is Britain's biggest, one of the biggest in the world, BAE Systems, suddenly became this huge global player. And then 2 years later, after Britain's arms industry was nationalised, we went to war with Argentina.
That ship was a danger to our boys. That's why that ship was sunk.
The Falklands War became this kind of global shop window for the British arms industry. So you had new weaponry and technology like the Harrier jump jet being demonstrated across the world. Yeah, the whole thing kind of whipped up again this huge sort of patriotic fervour. You know, Thatcher, who, you know, prior to that point was unlikely to win another term, you know, ended up staying in for another, 12 years, something like that, 11 years. Yeah, she got re-elected on a massive landslide. And, you know, it was good because only 907 people died in the Falklands War and only 3 civilians, though notably no one from the arms industry. This here is Thales UK in Crawley in Sussex, very near to Gatwick Airport. The French government is a major shareholder in Thales. I mean, they do a lot of different things, but it is also one of the world's largest weapons manufacturers. It makes missile systems, drones. And look, I'm not singling out Thales. There are a lot of, all throughout the country, there are weapons plants. So I thought we'd just come to Thales and we'll just show you, you know, how in the middle of a town like Crawley there is a huge company that makes weapons that get sent to overseas. Thales in 2022 was accused of violating European sanctions for selling equipment to Russia that had been used to kill civilians in Ukraine. Thales said in response to this accusation, no defence equipment export contract has been signed with Russia since 2014 and no delivery has been made to Russia since the start of the conflict in Ukraine. That's what they said, and that they had decided to cease operations in Russia. That doesn't mean that Thales weapons weren't and aren't still being used in Ukraine that had been sold to Russia prior to them deciding to stop selling.
Right.
August 2014, the European Union imposed an arms embargo on Russia following the annexation of Crimea. However, a loophole allowed pre-existing deals to continue.
Oh, right.
So France issued 76 export licenses for military equipment to Russia between 2015 and 2020, and it was worth 152 million euros. That was after the 2014 embargo that had been put in place. So in June 2024, Thales, that's this month as we're recording this, Thales signed 3 deals with Ukraine to provide drones and other air defence systems. So you now have a situation where the Ukraine conflict is using weapons designed by that company.
For both sides.
For both sides. Thales is not alone. I mean, BAE, they sell weapons to both India and Pakistan. You know,
so it's really in their interest that these conflicts continue because they're profiting.
Since the outbreak of the Ukraine war in February 2022, Thales shares have risen more than 80%, right? Wow. And the order book has reached a record high at 45 billion euros since the Ukraine war started. I actually looked up Thales share prices as well since October the 7th, since the Hamas attack on Israel. And in the 9 months or so since Israel retaliated, Thales shares rose 17.59%, and in the past 3 years, during which there's been the Russia conflict, Thales shares have risen 90.27%. BAE's shares have risen 45.25% since the Israel-Hamas war kicked off, and 167.8% since Russia invaded Ukraine. And with no end to these conflicts in sight, they're still climbing. Get a load of this, right? So in a profile in The Guardian in March 2024, the boss of Thales UK, a guy called Alex Cresswell, said, this was his justification, this is what he said: "I don't see that I'm profiting from misery, I see the opposite. By being prepared, I'm averting more misery. We should be preparing ourselves much more for the threat that is posed to our society. History shows that by preparing, we're less likely to be in a conflict." Remember, there's been no period where there hasn't been war going on in, well, pretty much since the end of World War II. You know, I haven't felt as uncomfortable and uncertain about the threat to the UK as I have since the end of the Cold War. It's a great build up, that rhetoric. There's been various protests at the Thales plant because they did a deal with, I think the company's called Abbey, which is Israel's largest weapons manufacturer, to build a drone based upon an Israel design that is used by the British Armed Forces. It was called an unmitigated disaster, and it cost billions, and it was, anyway, delivered late. But he said of the protests that have happened at Thales plants, he said, "It's a peculiarly British thing that we uphold our armed forces but simultaneously despise the industry that produces things that will protect them or make them more effective." He was asked, where did you last go on holiday, Alex? And he said, "Oh, I went to Provence in France." No, it was a funny story. There were 2 umbrella pine trees which mercifully stopped my drone from obeying the instructions to return to the last programmed home in Hampshire. I don't know if that's appropriate or ironic or a bit twisted, that he had a funny anecdote about his own drone which crashed in some trees and didn't fly home. But anyway, so Thales has a partnership with Elbit, which is Israel's largest weapons manufacturer, through a joint venture called UAV Tactical Systems. UTAC supplies components for the autonomous Hermes drones to Israel, and it was likely one of these drones which killed 7 aid workers during an attack on a food charity convoy in April 2024. According to Save the Children, following October the 7th, more children died in the first 3 weeks of the Hamas-Israel conflict than had died in all the conflicts around the world combined in the previous 4 years. In Ukraine, there's been an estimated 500,000 casualties, which as of May 2024 is confirmed to include 11,126 civilians, with a further 11,000 missing. And right now, as we speak, there are 20 wars happening in the world, a further 16 minor conflicts, and some of these wars have been going on for decades with no end in sight.
20
right?
wars.
And we, as a country, and are supporting those ongoing conflicts by manufacturing. It makes me so sorry. I am genuinely angry when I sort of look at this, that because our government supports the arms industry.
Well, it brings in tons of money for the country.
It issues export licenses and it arranges arms fairs. We're not consulted, right? On this stuff. This is what makes me so angry, and I feel so impotent to act. Anyway, look, France and the UK aren't alone in, pretty much every country in the world has its own arms companies. America's the largest, which has a 42% share of the arms industry, the global arms industry, followed by France, then Russia, then China.
Why is France so,
don't know,
such a heavy hitter in the arms industry?
So France, Russia, China, then Germany, then Italy, then the UK.
I mean, France is not a big country.
Then Spain.
Same with the UK and Italy and Spain.
And Israel, small country.
Yeah.
And then South Korea. Israel's like the 10th largest global exporter of weapons. And it often, I shit thee not, promotes its weapons as combat tested. I mean, in the UK, the defence industry generates around 20 to 25 billion in sales every year.
Why would they stop?
April 2024, 600 legal figures, this is in the UK, wrote to the government opposing the continued arms sales to Israel, arguing that the deteriorating situation in Gaza and the International Court of Justice's conclusion that there was, quote unquote, a plausible risk of genocide, obliged the UK to suspend arms deals or arms sales to the country. And the government responded by denying it was still sending arms to Israel. The government said, we're not, but failed to mention that it was continuing to grant export license to companies who were and are selling arms to the company. So the government were like, we're not doing it, but we are letting them.
The grant of licenses is done by the Department of Trade on the advice of the Foreign Office, and the Foreign Office has to look at compliance with international humanitarian law based on an assessment of the commitment that Israel has, the capability that they have, can they actually deliver on this capability, and the compliance.
Have you seen any evidence, been made aware of any evidence, or have reasonable grounds to believe that Israel has breached international humanitarian law?
Well, what I have to do is act on the advice that I'm given, and that advice is based on what we believe is happening, and so we ask a whole series of questions of the Israeli government.
You said, and I quote, "One of the things we'd like the Israelis to do is switch the water back on." Now, that says that they turned it off. It says that you recognise they have the power to turn it on. Therefore, isn't turning water off and having the ability to turn it back on but choosing not to, isn't that a breach of international humanitarian law?
I'm not a lawyer.
March the 8th, 2024, the CEO of BAE Systems, this individual, Charles Woodburn, he sold 331,716 shares, which netted him personally over 4 million quid, right? £1 million more than he would have received on October the 6th, 2023. Literally his shares as a result of that conflict. I don't know.
Do you know what freaks me out? We've got an election coming up, and we were watching the debates recently. It was a debate against the two main candidates, and well, one of them is trying to bring in conscription, national service.
Well, this is interesting.
Which makes you think, why? Oh, because I want to boost morale and patriotism in our country, and it's like, that does not ring true.
But this is my next point.
Right.
That idea of it's called militarism, right? Living in countries where the military is glorified and deified and everything. So it has been normalised. You can't say, oh, I'm not going to use nuclear weapons because you're called unpatriotic or weak on defence. You can't criticise Israel because you're called anti-Semitic. You can't, and if you're a politician, you're not going to get elected. The military-industrial complex it's been deliberate. They've put these mechanisms into place that they have woven themselves through, the world, so that and governments.
The actual soldiers aren't going to war, aren't joining the army because, oh, I want to make money for that guy with his house in Hampshire.
No, of course not. Of course they're not.
They're going because they want to protect their country and their family and their friends. So I understand that, and I have respect for them and their bravery.
Absolutely, 100%. And my two nephews, and my dad was in the army, and my sister was in the RAF.
So it's not that, and I think people sort of saying, let's say thank you to our armed forces. It's separate.
The individuals, soldiers, people serving in the armed forces, some of them just do it because they need a career, and need something.
That's true.
That's true.
But it's what I'm saying is, it's like, these are people who are risking their lives.
Yeah.
And they don't get paid a lot, and they get pretty much no aftercare.
But anyway, that's not the point. The point is the manipulation. You remember Top Gun Maverick?
Yeah.
Yeah, the most recent Top Gun film.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's Hollywood normalises it all the time. It's called the Military Entertainment Complex. Top Gun Maverick was produced with the assistance of the Pentagon. The aim of the original Top Gun was to restore faith in the military after Vietnam, because faith was at an all-time low. And after the original Top Gun came out, it boosted military recruitment by 500%. Right, and get this, right? This is not a fiction. This is true. Okay. In 1943, the Office of Strategic Services in America, which was the precursor to the CIA, issued a memo stating that cinema was one of the most powerful propaganda weapons at the disposal of the United States, and recommended the voluntary cooperation of all motion agencies. The Pentagon and the CIA have exercised direct editorial control and script approval over more than 2,500 movies and TV shows. Right, the Department of Defense has script approval, right, on everything from
Script approval
on everything from Star Trek 4: The Voyage Home to Iron Man to the Transformers franchise to Ernest Saves Christmas.
What?
I'm
Why?
not kidding. Ernest Saves Christmas, because they would have had some military component in them or whatever, and they want to make sure that they're seen in the right light. The United Office of War Information used cinema to stir up, patriotic sentiment during the war, and director Elmer Davies said that the easiest way to inject a propaganda idea into most people's minds is to let it go in through the medium of an entertainment picture when they do not realise that they are being propagandised.
To beat the Japanese and to do the job thoroughly, we have got to understand them. The Japanese are not easy to know. They are as different from ourselves as any people on this planet. The real difference is in their minds.
The way we are manipulated and conditioned, that is what makes me so freaking angry. And I've bought into it in the past, and I'm not saying I don't support the individual soldiers, but what I also certainly don't support is these people getting so freaking rich off of drones and new AI weapons and stuff that are killing people in wars that do not have to happen. They do not have to happen. Afghanistan was a disgrace. The Iraq War was a disgrace. None of these wars need to happen. No one de-escalates.
I agree.
No one de-escalates. I'm not shouting at you, I'm just angry. No one de-escalates, and what we have are these rich pricks sat behind the scenes who are just getting richer and richer and richer and rubbing their hands with glee and going, oh, but this is making the world safer. The question I sort of set out to ask is, are we the bad guys? Are we the baddies now? And frankly, I can't. How are we even the baddies when a subjective or objective good doesn't even exist anymore? The wars that get fought now feel avoidable, and yet they're not, because there is no incentive to avoid them, and there is, as is always the case, so much money to be made. We've got politicians now, we've got Nigel Farage in the UK going, oh, NATO, provoked Russia, and I said it years ago. What Russia's done is disgusting. What America and Britain have done is disgusting. We went into Afghanistan on the flimsiest of justifications. Likewise, Iraq. What did any of that? Even at the time, we were all going, "What the hell is this?" We were told there were weapons of mass destruction. That was a lie. It was a literal lie that has been found out, and no one seems to be being held accountable for any of this shit. And then you follow the money back. These politicians who are in the pocket of these rich executives, these rich pricks with their houses in Provence, where they're flying their drones for fun. Where they're the drones that their company makes. They're killing
blood money.
They're killing kids.
Yeah.
It is sick and it is twisted. And seriously, the more I read all this stuff, there's so much more I could put in.
How do they sleep at night?
How do they sleep at night? Because he's telling himself that he's making the world safer. You're not.
He knows. Deep down, he knows that's a lie. He knows that's complete BS. He knows that. Because you know what? If he didn't know it, then we wouldn't have to have influences over Hollywood and all these other things and, supporting politicians, etc., etc.
I think what has happened in the last 20 years is that the public have become more and more disillusioned and are seeing through the lies. I think Afghanistan and Iraq were a huge turning point for seeing the decisions that our governments make are not always the most logical or the most honourable or the most good.
They're not keeping really their people in mind.
All of us saw Iraq and Afghanistan and went, this is not making us safer. Why is this happening? Why are they fighting this war? Because surely all it is doing is breeding the next generation of people who hate us. And likewise, what is going on in Israel now is breeding the next generation of resentment, the next generation because, and they know we're sending weapons there. They just seem to be wars for the sake of wars. And then when you look back at why, it's because we're being manipulated into supporting this incredibly lucrative industry, this military industrial complex. Fuck. Anyway, sorry, that was all got way too heavy. What a shift that video took, eh, everyone? We're sat in a lay-by, which is weird. Look, I know our videos are confusing because we're just like completely silly, and then here's a bit of history, here's a bit of, and then
it gets really heavy.
But that's what we do, It's difficult to categorise, I know that.